Oh, can't hear.
Hi, my name is Ed Marx. I serve as the Chief Digital Officer.
Can't hear.
All right, you can't hear me. Okay,
In and out.
I'm gonna switch over. Okay, hold on one second. We're gonna switch technologies here.
Here we go.
Okay, sorry. That's the first time that happened. That's why we do it live, because it's exciting. My name is Ed. I serve as the Chief Digital Officer, Health and Life Sciences Tech Mahindra. Really excited to talk about the Chief Information Officer as well as the Chief Digital Officer and the emergence of the CDO, as we refer to it, and what that means for the CIO. And there's no one better in the industry to speak about this than my guest, Hillary Ross. So really excited to have this time together for the next 30 minutes. We are live, which means that you can ask questions and interact directly with Hillary and myself. So you know how to use the technology. So enter your questions and I'll be moderating those and we'll get to as many as we can. So Hillary, thank you for being our guest. And please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey.
Sure. Thank you, Ed. I'm so pleased to be here with you today. I'm a partner at Witt-Kiefer. Witt-Kiefer has been in business 50 years. It's a retained search firm specializing in leadership and higher education and healthcare. And within Witt-Kiefer, we have a designated IT practice, and I lead that practice with a great team. And we focus on technology-related searches. One thing we do is we're always keeping our eye on the future and the evolution of those roles. And one of those roles is the Chief Digital Officer role. So I'm very pleased to be here today to speak with you about that role, its evolution, and talk to your audience and answer their questions as well.
Yeah, this is so current and relevant. We are seeing a lot of CDO positions being created. And relatedly, we want to talk about where those sit in organizations and the CIO, what that means for the CIO. So I'll ask a few questions that I know some of our audience members have and get some insight. So what do you see as the trend, Hillary, with the emergence of the CDO?
Sure. So about maybe 3 years ago, we started looking at the prevalence of chief digital officers in industries other than healthcare. And that's always a good sign of what could be coming to healthcare. A large health system out east asked us to come in and talk about the role. So we did a little research and had our researcher survey the landscape of CDOs in healthcare. And there were only 8 at the time, 3 years ago. And when we looked at the profile of those CDOs, a couple were CIOs, but most were coming up from other backgrounds. So in preparation for our talk today, I went back to our researcher, and now it's about 2 years later, and I asked him to look across health systems and tell me how many CDOs there are now. And there were 33. So from 8 to 33 in about 2.5 years. And the majority of those have come into existence in the last year and a half. So I definitely see this as a role that's gaining traction and that we're going to be seeing more and more of. And then, in looking at today's CDOs, sort of half come from healthcare, but not necessarily CIOs. They have backgrounds in strategy, innovation, analytics. Some are physician CMIOs that are serving as CDOs, and a few are COOs, backgrounds as COOs in health systems. And then the other half are coming from outside of healthcare, CDOs in healthcare, from industries like transportation, entertainment, payers, startup, retail, and a few out of consulting companies. So it's a real mix.
Yeah, and I personally think it's exciting because there's strength, I think, bringing in outside best practices into healthcare and really helping lead this digital transformation we all speak about. Can you speak, Hillary, about what you're seeing in terms of reporting relationships? Like, where does the CDO fit in when we talk about the C-suite?
Several different models are emerging, and it'll be interesting to see what becomes the norm over time. And we're doing searches in all these different models. So, one I'd say is the most progressive, which is an SVP, Chief Digital Officer, a seat at the leadership table, reporting to the CEO, the COO, or the Chief Administrative Officer. But no matter where the report is, they are having a seat at the CEO's leadership table, with the CIO and all of IT reporting up to that role. So that seems like the most progressive, and that's an organization that has a vision for large-scale transformation, like someone to really lead reimagining of healthcare at their organization. And then several of the other models are a peer to the CIO, and they could either both report to the same person or different people, and that can work, but it also can have its challenges. And then the combination of CIO, CDO, and again, that can work or have its challenges. The CIO role has evolved over time and become a very strategic business partner of the organization with massive responsibilities, as you know, infrastructure, application, clinical systems, rev cycle, security, data warehousing, analytics, and now you're going to be folding in, the digital officer role. So, I mean, that's a lot. So how can that best be structured? In some organizations, we're seeing that when the CIO has a combined role as the digital officer, they have like a strong deputy CIO under him or her that can handle a lot of that frees the combined CIO digital officer, to focus primarily on digital innovation and strategy. Otherwise, it just gets diluted, and they're sort of one-off. It reminds me of in the early years when health systems would come to us and say, we want you to recruit a CIO for us, but we also need a CMIO, so find us one person to do both. And I mean, those are two big roles, really two different roles, and it didn't work. Definitely CMIOs have become CIOs. That's worked, but then they also have CMIOs. So, combining both of those roles without the right structure underneath, will that have lasting, long-term transformation implications for the organization? Personally, I think it's doubtful. And then another model is having a director level or an AVP level digital within the department of the CIO. And usually those roles and responsibilities are more project oriented. So for example, you're responsible for, optimizing our website and our online presence. So it's not like a full scale digital transformation for the organization, but more digital projects that they oversee. So those are sort of the various roles that have evolved.
Yeah, those are great insights in terms of we've been talking about sort of the growth in the role of the CDO, the models for where the CDO and CIO fit in. So that's really important to understand. And I'm going to now flip to a different line of questioning, but I just want to remind everyone, we are live. So if you have any questions, and I see several, I will get to those as we keep going down this route. So Hillary, if I'm a CIO today, and let's just say I'm a traditional CIO, grew up through the IT ranks, and I'm thinking to myself, and I know a lot of people are thinking this. All right, I see these, I hear the numbers Hillary's sharing, a lot of CDOs coming in from outside, very popular models, CIO reporting to the CDO. What do I do to enhance my skills, prepare myself, because maybe I do want that CDO role? So what is the typical skill gap that might be there while we're looking to the outside that maybe I can shore up and present myself as the candidate for CDO?
Well, first, I want to say I don't think CDOs are going to replace CIOs. So I don't think, I think today's CIO needs to ask him or herself, do they want to be a CDO? Is that a pathway? Because they very well could, prefer staying the CIO and be a really important, continue to be a very important, integral part of the organization. And some CIOs that we've spoken to aren't motivated by the innovation element that it takes to be a CDO. They're very satisfied remaining being a CIO. So they shouldn't feel compelled to have to go down that path. But certainly if they want to, there are definite considerations and steps they can do to prepare for that role. And so several of those are experience in assessing an organization and preparing a digital strategy. I mean, 'cause that's going to be key for CDO. So that experience. Building a network, both in and outside of healthcare. Today's CIO has to be a student of transformation in other industries. So get out of your own niche and look at finance, hospitality, airlines, retail, and understand how digital has transformed those industries in the last 15 years to understand what could be applicable in coming to healthcare. And then also build your network by joining digital organizations. There's really terrific ones out there. There's, HIMSS, of course, which promotes education and digital. They just released a very comprehensive white paper on digital transformation in healthcare. Chime also. There's Node.Health, which I know, Ed, you've spoken at their conferences, an amazing organization that is looking at evidence-based practices for digital technologies. There's something called the CDO Club, which is not only healthcare, but non-healthcare. It's a great resource. And then there's also another great resource, that chiefdigitalofficer.net, which has a lot of resources and contacts there. So I think in anything, it's important to find your mentors and build your network.
Yeah.
And then be seen as a thought leader in your organization. Innovation is key. That's what everyone is looking for, innovation, digital innovation.
Yeah. Right there, even though the webinar is free, that was worth the price of admission right there. Those golden nuggets, Hillary. Hillary just shared probably 10 things. I was writing them all down. 10 things that you can do. So whether or not you aspire to be the CDO, like you were saying, Hillary, sometimes it's you just want to be the CIO and that's needed and fine. But all of those are still relevant even to the CIO who wants to remain in that particular area. So really good stuff, really practical thing. We have so many questions, so I'm going to switch to our questions. How do you see marketing fitting in into all this, right? Because a lot of this now, you're not only into the digital domain, the IT domain, you're into marketing, you're into, and I've expanded myself, patient experience. So how does it all fit in?
Yeah. I mean, marketing definitely is, part of the stakeholders for the CDO, in addition to legal, PR, the executive team, the physician leadership. They're all stakeholders for the CDO. The CDO needs to build relationships with all of those, and they're all important pieces to the CDO's digital strategy to make it work.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe repeating it, Hillary, it was in the very beginning. I think the number may have been 32, but how many organizations are you seeing having a CDO? And then what's your prediction? Do you think it's going to grow by 10% a year, or do you have any sort of idea like how much growth you're going to see there?
Well, I think just, in the last 2.5 years, it's tripled in growth. And I think, as organizations transform to value-based, as they start looking to patients as consumers, as the patient population, their appetite is more increased by all the choices available and, getting their services faster. Health systems are going to, to remain competitive and to better serve their patient population. I think, ultimately they're going to need CDOs to drive this culture change for the organization. So I expect dramatic increase in these roles.
Yeah, I don't see it slowing down either. And to your point earlier, Hillary, when you look at other industries who've kind of gone before us, you saw that trajectory that you're talking about, that triple, and so it's just going to continue to grow. So there's more questions along the same lines, Hillary, about all the relationships you now have to manage. So the chief transformation officer might be in your organization, the CMIO, patient experience I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of different constituents that now have a pretty big voice in driving sort of digital. Is there any more color that you might add in terms of some of the key skills that one would want to develop to make sure that the IT voice doesn't become tactical but remains strategic?
Right. I think soft skills for the CDO leader cannot be understated. Extraordinary leadership, a strong communicator, diplomacy, huge change management at large scale. Someone that can break silos down, because that's traditionally how health systems have operated. And then just, rethinking and reimagining the delivery of healthcare and championing that, in the culture of the organization. So, the personal style of the CDO to bring together all these different groups into a cohesive strategy is key to success.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I'm just smiling thinking about both my current role, my previous role, where you could not be successful if you didn't have the soft skills to develop all those relationships, be very collaborative. And you mentioned that because everyone feels, a lot of these leaders who are chief transformation officers, patient experience, even finance, right? Because finance oftentimes is the front end of the engagement or part of the front end of patient engagement. They all believe that you know they have the key role. And if they think in silos, the organization's in big trouble. So your role is to have the soft skills to bring everyone together towards a common purpose.
And
Easier
also,
said.
I think also, Ed, key is credibility. And a big part of that is, having a seat at the executive table and having executive support for these big changes. That's key as well.
Yeah, I would agree. So we are live. We are down to about 8 minutes. A lot of questions. If you have more questions, please feel free to add those. We will try to get to all of them as we move along. But we really want to hear from you, and we will redirect where we're headed based on some of your inputs. So Hillary, what about the education that the CDO or CIO has to do for the organization so they understand the role? Because you could recruit the best CDO and CIO, but does the CEO understand? We assume, but the COO. So what would you recommend either role does in terms of educating their peers about their role or capability?
Right. Well, I mean, that goes into the building of the relationships and engaging them in the process and listening to their needs and identifying, problems where they can, come up with digital solutions, and then, preparing a strategy and a roadmap. And then part of implementing that is going to be the training and education as well. And that gets into the collaborative nature with all the different stakeholders. You might need IT to help with the training of that. You might need marketing to help with the training. It depends on what those solutions will be.
What would you say are and you covered several, and I'm just trying to bring a little bit focus now because I see some of the questions, and I know that people are looking for, as they self-assess, what might be a gap, or maybe a more positive way of spinning it is to say like something they aspire to. So if you think back, Hillary, over your last 4 or 5 CDO placements from outside of healthcare into healthcare, what were maybe 2 traits that individual had that you don't always find on the healthcare side?
Well, I think the word that comes to mind that we hear the most is innovation. They want to hear examples of innovation, and then driving large scale change with competing resources and priorities, and examples of those accomplishments. I think those were 2, predominant areas that we're always asked to focus on when we're evaluating for these roles.
Yeah, one thing, and we always try to be practical, and if I can just add, I mean, people want to hear from you, Hillary, not me, but I'll just jump in and add one item that worked really well in my past is we developed a video series. I think it was called Digital X, or you can call it whatever, Innovation X. And we were doing a lot of innovation, but not necessarily did everyone know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do these 1-minute videos, try to publish them once a week, once every 2 weeks, and it had the same intro, like music, bumper music, and a graphic, and it ended the same way with a bumper on that exit. But in that 60 seconds, we would have a client. So it wasn't IT, it wasn't me, one of our clients, and they would talk about some innovation that they were a part of, and IT, and what a difference it made to clinical outcomes, maybe financial, maybe patient experience. And that was an easy way to remind everyone. And I think oftentimes there is a lot of innovation happening, but people don't know broadly. So we would publish these videos, and then our customers got into it. They wanted to be in the videos. And I'll say this one last thing about this technique. There's many others, but this is a pretty simple one to do. So I would email often, and I remember when I started doing these videos, I would have my C-suite members. They were in my office sometimes 2 minutes later after I sent out the video via email, talking about, whoa, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know Dr. So-and-so had that happen, and they're doing that. And whereas if it was just a regular email or an update, I would never have that interaction. But there was something about the video, hearing directly from a customer, that made a difference. So that's just an example.
That's great. That's
Another,
a great creative way to,
yeah,
communicate what you're doing in the organization. And that is really important to
yeah.
communicate successes.
Yeah, it turned out, when we first thought of it, we didn't think all that much of it, but it became this huge thing. And then the fun thing, and as I promised, I'll move on to the next question. But the fun thing too, not only did it bring the C-suite into my office, and I would go to their office too, but I'm giving an example of the video, is the customers who started helping were in the videos. Sometimes they added their own humor, but it was hilarious. So these videos were not only informative, but they would do these just funny things, and they all enjoyed it so much. And again, it was all about patient care, patient safety, quality of care, and it gave us this reputation that we wanted and was real. That, hey, we're digital, we're innovative, and those sort of things. Okay.
And you know what else, Ed, which is important though? It adds to the culture of innovation, those types of things. And that's really important as well.
Yeah, I wish we had time to show it. It's just this one in particular. Anyways,
You put on your website.
This is a spin on a previous question, but we didn't talk about specifically. So the Chief Innovation Officer, right? We were talking about digital transformation, CDO. Where's the line? So I think you already touched on this, but maybe one last time. Where is the line, or is there a line between CIO, CDO, and all the other Cs?
Yeah. In the organizations where we've done chief digital officer searches, there's also been the innovation officer, and they work together, they collaborate together. The digital brings the digital expertise and processes. And the strategy and innovation officers bring sort of more the overarching strategies of the organization, and they should be tied together. I mean, digital should be supporting the strategic goals of the organization. So it's very interconnected.
Yeah. I had a mentor, also a CEO that I reported to, and he said, Ed, what you do is like the fabric of a coat. You don't necessarily see it on the outside, but all the fabric inside that stitches everything together and keeps everything going. And so it requires a level of humility as well. Right, you were even describing, before we came on camera, a candidate that you recently placed from outside of healthcare. And one of the first things you said about that person was humility. And I think leadership requires humility, and you don't have to own everything.
Right, right. And that goes to the breaking down of silos and the territories and all, working together as one system.
Yeah. Well, I knew this 30 minutes was going to go by super fast, especially after the first minute. Hillary, you're just amazing, full of insights, and again, it was so practical. All the advice that you gave and the number of questions that came in, people are really, really engaged. We could have talked at least for another hour, but thank you so much for what you do and for your time.
It's always a pleasure connecting with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have upcoming webinars, although it's always hard to top something like this. But we are continuing our series on race relationships, and in a few weeks it'll be with Caroline Bishop, actually a connection that Hillary and I have in common. And then we're going to talk more digital transformation with the CEO of one of the global leaders in creative, content, and commerce. You don't want to miss any of these. And then Dr. Eric Lee and Ray Lowe from Altamed, they've done some fantastic transformative work. And then finally, my boss's boss, CP Gurnani, he's the president CEO of my organization. And so it'll be a pleasure to speak with the leader of Tech Mahindra. So lots of good stuff coming up. Again, thank you for your participation. Have a super, super day.
Bye, Ed.
See you. Bye.